And the recording is now live.
Wonderful. So, Salim, thank you so much for taking the time today to meet with me and record this for some of the constituents in your area. Um, I just wanted to say a little bit about myself before we get into things with you. But my name is Cherie Elal. I am a social worker. I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I am a part of the Michigan Social Workers for Palestine group. So I was really excited to hear that there was somebody challenging Hillary Scholten this term in August. And I really appreciate the more that I got to learn about you, dig into you and your history a little bit. Really appreciate some of the stances that you take in regards to specifically Palestine, but also things that we need here in our community, in our state. And just wanted to take some time today to ask you some questions regarding all of that and a little bit about the history and how you came about um, starting what your interest in politics really where it began. I guess that's where we can start today is maybe kind of starting where the history with your history.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks for taking the time to do this.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I'm just happy to get more conversations out there for people to understand of who I am. I am running as a Democrat in Michigan's third congressional district for U.S. House of Representatives. But beside the party stuff, I guess the main focus of my campaign has been to not try to dictate people and try to persuade them a certain way. The biggest thing for me is simply just to get people the information that they're interested in. I feel like with politics it's such a dark space, and you don't really talk about it. Our district is really, it leans Democratic. I would say it's pretty 50-50. It's one of the weirdest things where you'll drive down a street and you'll see a Trump flag, you'll see a Joe Biden flag, and probably this year you'll see RFK signs as well, and Jill Stein stuff. So people are very different here, but I, the big thing with my campaign has been to just get out as much information on stances, and to get on the ballot. Even for my race, you had to get 1,000 signatures, the minimum, and 2,000 was the maximum. And when I was doing that, the big thing for me was I did not want to use any party connections. I wanted to go out there myself and go and get those signatures myself and have those awkward, sometimes tense conversations with people, because when I first started doing it, I didn't have any voter access. I was waiting on that, and I wasn't. I was very impatient, I guess you could say. So I would just blindly go up to houses and have conversations with people if they were willing to, and that meant very Republican people, very independent people, people that hate politics, Democratic, whatever. But the big thing to me during that conversation, or during those conversations, was just trying to understand where people's heads were at. And again, we are very diverse with where people find solutions at. But at the end of the day, everyone in this district, whether they have a family or are someone like myself, where I'm single, I'm a 31-year-old with no kids, we all just want what's best for our community. I don't see selfish people out here in this district. I don't see, middle most of the middle class, working class people. They're not trying to be selfish out here. They just want to have a safe community, a bright future for themselves, for their youth, for their families. And that was the important part for me that I learned from those conversations, going around getting those signatures with people. Um, as far as how I got into politics, I guess personally, I can kind of go through my story as well. So I was born and raised here in Muskegon, Michigan. Like I said, I'm 31, so I know I still have a lot of life ahead of me here. Um, but born and raised in Muskegon, Michigan. Started out at Muskegon Public Schools. Went over to Mona Shores. That's where I finished off for high school. Muskegon Community College for 2 years, then over to Michigan State, where I got an applied engineering sciences degree, and a minor in supply chain management. From there, I kind of got into my first bit of entrepreneurship. I started the Muskegon Risers soccer team with Matt Schmidt. If people remember those, the GRFC Muskegon Risers are still around today. But I won't forget, that was my first time of really being exposed to entrepreneurship. And I remember getting about 7,000 fans at Hausman Field with that soccer team, Muskegon Risers versus GRFC. And it was just such a cool feeling to bring the community out and just see the support that we got from people. And then in college, it was kind of at the end of college, start of working my first full-time job, but I also started a business called My Spartan Sublease with a couple friends. That one I used to sail with, two I grew up with. And it was a website where you would pay us $25 and we'd post your apartment, house, whatever you were trying to sublease. We post it to our website, and we would guarantee that we would get you a renter or someone to sublease your property. A lot of college students would leave for internships, co-ops, whatever it was. And so they would pay us about $25. It was interesting. It was a fun experience. When you're young, you don't really have much confidence in what you're doing, I guess. But it was interesting. I learned a lot about how to set up a business, marketing, tax stuff. It was quite the exposure that I got there. From there, I went and worked my first job for the company was called Aishin Automotive. It's a tier 1 automotive supplier. It was Toyota's main supplier. Magna's a big company. That's a competitor for them. But I was a sales engineer. I would travel North America and in the Asian markets as well, negotiating pricing, manufacturing. I would oversee my plants, any design changes. If someone had a door handle that wasn't working well, they'd call their dealership, they'd level it up to corporate. That'd be me at corporate. I'd work with our engineers in North America and in Asia to come up with new designs and then implement it on a mass level, mass production level for whatever vehicles it was. From there, I bought a beach wedding business called My Barefoot Wedding. No longer interested in it, or no longer have a stake in it. I sold it at the start of 2023. But we were an all-inclusive provider. We supported LGBTQ weddings. And we traveled the lakeshore from St. Joseph up to Traverse City, service destination weddings. And it was a small business that I could truly live on. We made I think our biggest year is about $500,000. So me and my childhood buddy, we ran that business together. And again, it kind of gave me that exposure to tax policies, how that's impacted on the federal level. I still won't forget when I got a tax return, and it was after Trump's Tax and Jobs Cuts Act in 2017, and seeing the increase that I got in my tax returns. So I did that for about 6 years, and then also had my real estate license for 3 years. I have 2 rental properties, one in Grand Rapids, one in Norton Shores. It's interesting. I'm not the handiest person, but I've learned a lot with homes and the kind of wealth that can create for people as well. And learning about, I guess, just how to invest in real estate as well. When I was doing the wedding stuff, we had a nonprofit called Better Coast Foundation, where we worked to clean up the lakeshore beaches, because a lot of the tourism along the lakeshore it runs based on how nice the beaches are. So we removed about 800 pounds of trash from Muskegon and Grand Haven beaches. We also had discussions with people about real estate, first-time home buyers, real estate investing. So I grew up, just personally, I grew up with 2 parents that were both refugees. My mom came over from Czechoslovakia in the 70s during their occupation of the Soviet Union. They sought asylum, claimed refugee status in Austria. And then my dad was born in an UNRWA refugee camp in Jordan. He came over when he was about 20 in the 80s. So they didn't really have any exposure to being an entrepreneur, real estate investing. They worked the same job, I'm sure, like most parents, for 20, 30 years. And yeah, so I'd never really had the personal experience with my parents, but that's how I got into it and really had a crash course with learning myself. And now to get to your question, as far as answering the politics stuff, my first, I would say, exposure with politics really came in 2020. I was helping on the social media side with the Muskegon mayoral race with Ken Johnson. I helped with his race. And then I was helping with a politician, Deb Warren and Will Snyder, were running against each other in the Muskegon area for state representative race. And that was kind of my start, where I started to think about maybe running myself. So I ended up filing in 2022, and I ran against Christian Grant. She ended up being victorious, but she won the Southeast Grand Rapids side. That was my first exposure to politics. From there, the Kent County Democratic Party asked me to be on their executive board. The 3rd Congressional District, I was an alternate delegate helping with Hillary Scholten's reelection efforts. I was on Grand Rapids, their planning commission board as well. And so I got to have a hand as well in the master plan that's coming out with the city, and planning the future as well. So a long-winded answer, but that's kind of the backstory there of my politics.
Thank you for that. Speaking of Hillary Scholten, so you have been volunteering or were volunteering more recently with her on her campaign, and decided, based on some of her practices and some of the things that she's voting for, it didn't align with your values and your ethics. Can you talk more about that? And I think, is that when you decided to run against her? Can you give a little bit of a background on that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I was, after 22, I lost in the primary for the Democratic nomination for state representative against Christian. And at that time, I was asked by Hillary herself to join her team in some capacity. At the time, I said no because she hadn't held a position, so I wasn't sure where her stances were on certain things. And then later, I joined as an alternate delegate through the state party. And what that means is the state party, the Michigan Democratic Party, will then set up for districts to help with reelection efforts. So for Hillary's, I was helping out with that. I didn't get too involved into it. They were starting to form it. I was helping out a little bit with just some social media stuff. And then once October 7th came around, I was seeing, to be honest, I kind of saw the same playbook being ran, I guess, by most Democratic politicians. So I saw just the same talking points that she was putting forward that we had heard before. I had seen throughout her time as well since then, as far as it's Democrats versus Republicans. They're crazy, we're normal. And I think that really hit a chord with me because, especially going around and having to get all these signatures. Like I said, I met a ton of Republican people. I grew up in Muskegon. For those who know Muskegon, it is a very split area. When you say these crazy Trump Republican people, you might be talking about my friend's dad, who's a big supporter of his. And so, I think it's important to me that we have a politician in office is willing to dial down the conversation when it comes to they're crazy, they're this, we're normal, because with politics, to me, it's important that we have discussions on topics. There's different ways to look at things. And I don't support the type of conversations of us versus them, because at the end of the day, when you say they're crazy, they're the Trump Republicans are this, you're isolating and alienating 45%, maybe 50% of your district, and you're still representing them. So I think it's important to dial back some of those conversations with the way you're using some of those words and saying, hey, I don't agree with, for example, tax policies we always hear with Republicans and Democrats is, oh, the Republicans are just looking to get tax cuts for the rich, and Democrats are just looking for the middle class people. There's different ways to look at those. So I don't think it's appropriate to have those types of words being thrown around as far as anyone that supports Republicans are radical people. I brought up like the corporate tax rate, for example. When Trump lowered that from the previous corporate tax rate, it was about 38%. He lowered it to 21%. I consider myself a Democrat, and I was a small business owner. That helped me. That gave me more money I could take it to myself, or like if you're a smart business person, you'd invest it in your business, you'd invest it in your staff, make them happier, because when you're a business owner, you are the face of everything, but your staff is the machine behind it. So it's important to always make sure that they're happy and that they're satisfied. And so I bring up those points just to kind of have discussions with people where, corporations are also those small businesses and those mom and pop shops in your community. And when you say, oh, let's just isolate these corporations and say they're these radical people, well, you're talking about people in your community as well. So that was, I guess, a big frustration with me with her was I felt like it's just the divisiveness again. I don't feel like we're having those open discussions with people because I've had Republicans sign for me and say, hey, as long as you promise that you'll always keep an open mind and have, stop villainizing us, I'm happy to sign for you.
Yeah, for me with Hillary, what I do not appreciate, what I've seen unravel since October 7th, and I think I've told you this too, was that she, during her campaign, her last campaign, um, a lot of my Black and brown friends endorsed her. And she used that. And I don't think that she wouldn't have won if that didn't happen. And a lot of my Black and brown friends that supported her during that time, during her election period, reached out to her after October 7th, and it's been crickets. She promised them that she would not be like any other politician, that she would fight for them when she got there. I haven't seen too many things on the agenda that's fighting for people, middle class, people that are impoverished, the oppressed. You say the middle class, but I don't hear anything about the people that are oppressed, the people that are not able to um, afford rent. Our living wage is not, everything is going up. The economy, cost of living is just incredibly high since the pandemic. And wages are not going up except everything else. And so I, as a social worker, am also, very cognizant of that, where it's not just the middle class, it's hard to live in middle class as a middle class person, but also the people that do not have and are not afforded those luxuries and have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make it by, that are usually single parents. I have a 30-year-old son, and I was a single parent. I raised him as a single parent. There's no way that I would be able to do that in this day and age the way I did before. Um, so yeah, I'm curious about that, because what she's doing is she's voting for our tax dollars to go to, right now, what really upsets me is going to Israel. The other thing that I didn't mention is that I am Lebanese. And it does bother me that my tax dollars are going to kill my people, basically. I'm paying to kill my people right now. And so that's another thing. And I know she went to Israel back in August of last year. She drank the Israel Kool-Aid. She walked, the streets of Jesus. I'm sorry. When I saw those videos, I'm just like, oh my gosh. It really just like, oh, she's drinking the Kool-Aid. So with all of that said, it's not just the people that does, the higher income brackets. It didn't really, it didn't really help me much. Actually, I am middle class. I don't see much of a tax return from that. I am a business owner currently now, so maybe I would see some sort of benefit of that when I do my taxes. However, I don't want to do my taxes because I don't want my taxes to go to kill my people right now. So anyway, with all of that said, what are your thoughts on all of that?
So one of the big things, I was actually watching some speeches last night. I was working on my website and just trying to write up a new post. And I was watching old JFK speeches, talking about secret societies. He was talking about the wars that were going on. And he actually mentioned the Congo that was going on, which I'm reading Heart of Darkness right now. I'll get into that later. But it's the same. Short answer, I'm very anti-war. I just saw RFK Jr. also talking about how he's planning to cut the defense budget and how he's planning to cut the funding for some of these wars. I haven't read through the whole speech, so I don't want to quote too much from it all. But I'm considered radical now in my party because I say I'm against the wars. I'm against the federal or the foreign military spending going to these different countries. I am, my grandparents are Palestinian on my dad's side. They were displaced in 48. My dad was born in an UNRWA refugee camp, which Hillary voted to cut the funding for. Now you have a UN report that just came out recently that said 50,000 kids are now needing, I think it was aid to get through because 50,000 kids are on the brink of malnutrition and famine. And that goes against international law to hold back that aid. We saw the pier that was going to be created as well for Gaza, and it's not there. It got washed away. That was millions of taxpayer dollars that were supposed to go through, and they couldn't use, or they had to use the pier because Israel was blocking the entry points from Egypt and from Israel to get aid into there. So I point out those violations of humanitarian aid that needs to get in. That's a crime as well that needs to be investigated. The need for independent investigations that need to go through as well into Gaza. That's not happening as well. I will say this about Hillary going to Israel. There's nothing wrong with that. She has every right to go and visit and tour. I always have the argument, though, of if you're going to see one side, you need to see the other. That's why, again, when I was going to get signatures, I was meeting with Democrats in my party, I was meeting with independents, and I was meeting with Republican people. I can be selfish and say I was getting out ahead of it and hoping I win this primary so I could have those discussions already with Republican people, because when I go to the general election, I'll already know what the talking points are. I can research it right now because I've had those conversations and I've heard both sides of it. Now, when it comes to the foreign military spending as well, we've spent, I think the stat was $300 billion, just under $300 billion to Israel since their inception in 1948. I think they're the 10th largest exporter of weaponry and 27th largest economy in the world right now. So this is not a small country that we're talking about here. And when it comes to sending more aid to this country, their prime minister right now is being charged with corruption charges. This is not my opinion. This is factual from his own court system. How can I justify sending more military funding and more American tax dollars to a country where their own prime minister is under corruption charges by his own court system? I can't go around my district justifying that to people. That's insane to think about. I understand there's a lot of people, and I've talked to people about this, that are, still supporting Israel. That, I'm not going to be able to change their opinion right now or right on the spot, I guess. But I try to have the open discussion with them and saying, if you're not going to believe the humanitarian side, at least look at it this way. And I bring up this point to them of, if you're a pro-Israeli person, in 1967, they had the Oslo Accords, which set aside the Gaza Strip and the West Bank for the Palestinian people. Didn't give them statehood. It just gave them the territories. And since then, you have 500,000 illegal settlers in the West Bank since 1967. Nobody has said anything about that until October 7th happened. Now you've seen the percentages increase of people separating themselves with the Democratic Party, separating themselves from Biden, saying that they're not happy with all this money that is going forward to Israel. So if you are a pro-Israeli person, hasn't their response been the worst thing for you? Because what have you gained since October 7th with the response? There's been 37,000, I think was the latest stat, north of that, dead Palestinian people. And since then, there's still a presence of Hamas in that area. You now have lost all of your connections. There's been multiple ceasefire agreements that have been vetoed by the U.S., isolating us and Israel from the world stage. Colombia is the largest exporter of coal to Israel. They've cut ties as well. They've even opened up an embassy as well in the West Bank. None of this was even a thought or a consideration before October 7th. And all of that has happened since that time. So when you're running a country, when you're running a business, you got to think about the security of your country. You got to think about the prosperity of your country and your business. And I challenge people on those discussions of what good has happened for you if you're an Israeli person, if you're, an American person that supports Israel since October 7th. You've lost all of your connections. Turkey's even cutting ties with you as well. So you're losing some of that stability and connections that you've had. Not to mention as well, the main discussion that you had before October 7th was the Abraham Accords with President Trump that he put forward. Billions of taxpayer dollars were sent to normalize relations with these, Arab Brotherhood countries with Israel, and it worked with those countries. They were normalizing relations with Israel, and now most of those countries have cut ties with Israel and no longer want to have that normalization. And I even say to some people as well that, just because these are, I guess Muslim majority countries, none of them have stood up really for Palestinians. You see them staying silent because they put on these photo ops, they put out these strong worded statements only because they know that their people are strong supporters of Palestine. I'd say that the leaders of like Saudi Arabia and some of these other countries, I don't think they really care about the Palestinian people. Otherwise, they would have taken more action since. But they only put out these photo ops, these statements, so that way their people don't perform a coup against them. So short answer, though, I do not support all of this foreign military spending that has been going forward, that Hillary's been approving, because it goes back to your other point as well, where you were asking about with investments and how you've been feeling with home prices, everything in the area. I have my real estate license since November of 21. We saw it under Trump with the PPP loans that were going forward with all the federal spending. We've now seen it with these foreign military spending packages that have come forward. All of that spending has put our national debt at about $35 trillion. Like I said, I'm 31. I'm thankful that I do have a house. But a lot of my friends don't, or are in that ballpark of trying to get their first home. You've seen home prices. The national average has gone from $260,000 to $400,000. And sure, it could be the threat of supply, but it's also the amount of federal spending that's entered our economy that I feel like has driven up those prices. So that's why I oppose it so strongly, because I feel like it's impacting people's ability to buy a home. That money is not going to social programs here domestically. It's not going to help the 36,000 homeless veterans that we have, or the 106,000 people that I think it was 106,000 that died of opioid overdoses last year. None of this is going to help them. It's going to help a country whose prime minister is being tried with corruption charges. Ukraine, for example, a study came out. They're the second most corrupt country behind Russia in Europe. We're sending our taxpayer dollars to this. And you can go on Hillary's website. She is very simple for representatives. They get a list of projects every year that they're supposed to request federal funding for. It totaled about $29 million. Most notably the big one was the Muskegon Heights Broadway project, Broadway Avenue, Muskegon Heights. It's a grossly underfunded city. I used to play basketball there a lot when I was younger. If you drive in that area and hit a pothole, your car, these are not potholes, these are sinkholes. They will mess up your car. They're that deep. And they requested $5.1 million in spending. If you go on Hillary's website, you can see all these projects that she was supposed to request federal funding for. The total came out to just over $29 million. She got just over $10 million. It was about 34%. If I came back with my dad, he was a strict guy when I was younger, but if I came back from school with the report card that said 34% out of 100, my dad would be quite upset with me. And I think the people should be upset as well, because that project that was supposed to get $5.1 million, she got $500,000, but she supported the $95 billion foreign aid package that went abroad. And she had a little photo op at Muskegon Heights with a $500,000 check. And it's like, are we trying to move these community forward, or are we trying to move the communities abroad forward? And to me, when you're representing this country in Congress, the main focus is the American people and their interests always. So I wouldn't have supported those packages because I don't believe that's where the money should be going. I think it should be going here domestically.
I appreciate to hear that. And speaking of which, so we haven't really talked about AIPAC quite yet. Do you know how much she's taken from AIPAC?
Yeah. So $10,000 was what I last saw. I saw there's the AIPAC tracker website as well. They had it at $223,000 that she's received.
Open seats. Yeah.
Yep. I'm glad you bring up AIPAC as well. So the former representative, Justin Amash, he was considered a Tea Party Republican. Him, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, those guys are the Tea Party Republicans. Thomas Massey talked about this actually recently. He talked about how in his race, he was being challenged because he's very outspoken, kind of shares the same feelings with the foreign military spending. He believes it should be going to Americans first. And because of that, because he was outspoken about it, AIPAC decided to put $400,000 to challenge his opponent, or into his opponent's campaign to challenge him. And if you look at the amount of votes that have gone through in Congress, there were 18 votes in April of Israel-related topics. We haven't had 18 votes. I'm not going to cuss on here, but we haven't had 18 votes in our Congress in regards to healthcare, in regards to infrastructure. It is, I don't know how people, they've already been labeled this past Congress that Hillary's been a part of. I'm not blaming her, because as one of the 435 representatives, I get it. You can only do so much, but they've been labeled this past Congress as the worst Congress and least impactful Congresses we've ever had because of stuff like that. AIPAC has backed over 200 Republican candidates, and they support pro-life candidates as well. So I don't make the pro-life, pro-choice thing a focal point of my campaign, because I understand for a lot of people they're not as focused on that stuff. But I there's a reason I chose the Democratic Party, because I am a pro-choice candidate. I can get into that a little bit later here on the next part. But when Hillary does these AIPAC sponsored trips over to Israel, when she's receiving all this AIPAC funding, I pointed out to people, because the votes that have been going through, I worry about it, because the 18 votes that have been on only Israel related topics, the focus of, or the lack of focus, with AIPAC, where it's not registered under the FARA Act, which is the Foreign Agent Registration Act. They're not registered with that. And as a Democrat, I'm sure Republican people will point to this, but Democrats complained like nobody's business against Trump with the Russian interference. We had a Mueller report, all that stuff in 2016. And how is this any different? It is Americans. AIPAC claims to be, it's American citizens that are acting on behalf of Israeli interests. How is that not a foreign country? How is that not foreign interference?
They were the Zion. What was it? Zionists. What did they originally? I can't remember. Back in the day, it was the Zionists. I can't remember. Back in the day, and JFK actually, before he passed away, or was assassinated, was going to. They had to register with. There was going to be a whole new thing, and then he got assassinated. So they go on without any regulations. But the thing is that they are a foreign country. We are voting. We have $3.8 million per year for the next, for 10 years, Obama put into place. and I don't know what year we're into, going to them. They get free healthcare, they get universal healthcare, free tuition. I think they even have stipends, that they have monthly stipends. When, hello,
Yeah.
hey, what about America? That 3.8 billion. And then on top of that, do you know how much more that Hillary and other people have voted into for them to, there's billions more. There keeps like this
Yep.
package after package after package, not to mention TikTok, that's all Israel. You know, there, it's just, yeah, you're right. 18 topics going to Congress to vote on in regards to Israel, when we've got a huge housing issue. There are tons of children that are food insecure. I don't even know what the percentage is at this moment. There's not I pay $500 a month for my health care. That's ridiculous. You know,
Yep.
like what
I bring
I,
up with the JFK stuff. There's another part of that as well. Israel was supposed to disclose that they had nuclear weaponry, which is something that still hasn't been disclosed. And you bring up like the infrastructure and housing as well. Michigan's ranked. I've talked about it before with that Muskegon Heights project and some of the other spending things. Michigan's ranked 42nd in the nation when it comes to infrastructure by the American Society of Civil Engineers. That is very hard to attract businesses to our area when our infrastructure is not there. Not to mention, obviously, people driving on just personally driving. But as far as attracting businesses, we're ranked 32nd in the state when it comes to education as well. I'm concerned with that because as we look at emerging markets and emerging countries as well, kids nowadays are not competing against just American kids. You're seeing countries that are coming out of, starting to grow and prosper internationally, and our kids are going to have to compete against those. So I'm not just looking at it from a state level. I'm not
sorry.
just looking. You're good. I'm not just looking at it from a state level. I'm looking at it from an international level because these corporations, especially when you look at like tech companies that are are international companies, good luck competing with some of these other countries where these kids are coming out very educated, having higher standards of learning because these countries are actually investing in that stuff. To get to the TikTok stuff, by the way, that you mentioned, it's been talked about as well with it being a Chinese company. That's been the fear that's been pushed on it all. 60% of it is owned. 60% of it, is owned. Let me get the stats right. It's 20% are owned by the two Chinese developers that created it. 20% is owned by the employees, 7,000 of which are Americans. And then 60% of it are owned by an international group of investors. There's the ADL, which is a pro-Israeli group that came forward and said, I don't know if he got caught or is meant to come out because the ADL group came out and said it's a Palestine problem that we're having. Mitt Romney has come out as well and said, yeah, we couldn't let that platform go forward as well with the discussions that are going on there in support of Palestine.
I mean, it's the number one topic, trending topic is Palestine. It's all pro-Palestine. That's where everyone is getting their information.
And there's 170 million Americans that use that platform. To be honest, they use it sometimes for news because I can understand sometimes where they have doubts with the corporate news media.
It's Google. It's how I get patients. It's how I get clients. It's a lot. Yeah.
I want to talk as well about like some of those corporate media where they have pharmaceutical commercials going on during the news hours. That's something that I support banning. But let me finish up the TikTok ban. Hillary voted yes to ban that. My opponents have also said they supported that decision. I've been trying to point out to people that we have this uniparty system that is going on right now. There's me, Paul Hudson. He is being backed by his billionaire brother who started a super PAC to fund his campaign. Michael Markey is the Republican side as well. He was kicked off the ballot in 2022. He ran for the GOP nomination for governor. He submitted, he was caught up in a fraudulent signature scheme that was going on. I'm worried about letting people like that get involved and have this representation of our district. Hillary, for example, raised $3.8 million last election cycle. She looks to be on track for that same election or PAC pace this election cycle as well. I have not taken a single dollar from a single PAC this election cycle. I did take $1,500 from the Realtors Political Action Committee when I ran in 2022. This election cycle, I've not taken a single dollar. I've not taken a donation from anyone because I want to test people's belief and their stances on. I just want my politician to know that I want to know that my politician is not bought and paid for. Well, here you go. You have someone that's not bought and paid for. They're my own opinions, my own judgment. Either put up or shut up when it comes to August 6th and voting, because I'm putting myself out there right now and funding my own campaign. I have no dark money. It's no outside money like that. These are my opinions and stances that I believe puts America first and our relationships first with other countries as well. And again, with the TikTok ban, you're limiting freedom of speech there as well, with what people use to express themselves. Mm-hmm. I am not an influencer, but I've already met 3 people in my district while going around collecting signatures that make a full-time living on TikTok. Mm-hmm. I thought these people were only like Los Angeles type of people. I never thought they live here. They're here. It's so weird. It's so weird to think about. I've tried to post stuff on there, but you're taking away their livelihood. Yeah. And that was something that during COVID, I got my vaccinations. I did the double dose of Pfizer. I did the booster shot, but I told people I was ostracized by the party for doing this. But I said, you have to have some type of uniform mandates that you're putting forward, because I was running my wedding business at the time, and the state, if you recall, I promise there's a correlation here, mm-hmm. but the state came out with the regulations to keep it to 10 person gatherings from it was March until beginning of May. Then they opened it up to 100 person gatherings. Well, our business operated on city, county, and state beaches. And we even had the DNR office say in May, when they opened it up to 100 person gatherings, I thought we were saved. Our season was saved. We were going to have a wedding season. Well, the DNR said, no, you can't until July 1st, actually. You guys can't have more than you can only have 2 person gatherings. And then July 1st, you can open it up to 250 person gatherings. And I remember the frustrations I had because I put together a COVID safety plan. I bought the forehead scanner, thermometer scanners. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm making a living doing this stuff. You're taking away my ability to do it. I'm putting forth all these protocols. Are you going to shut down the beaches then? No, we're not shutting down the beaches. We're still going to allow people. And I go, I don't understand the reasoning for that stuff, because I'm taking all the safety measures. We have insurance. We have these protocols. I'm scanning people's temperatures. We're wearing masks. We're distancing, all this stuff. And you're now taking away my ability to make money. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm respecting the beach, but you're still allowing people to come here. And it's the same thing to me. Or excuse me, that's where people got frustrated, was you're taking away their freedoms there. And it's the same thing that I see with TikTok that a lot of people are getting upset over, because they're expressing themselves. They're making their living on there. They're taking in independent news sources. Because I look at TikTok, YouTube, all these different social media platforms. It's a curiosity for people. They want to see different perspectives because they're maybe not satisfied with corporate media and what they're putting forth. So yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me with TikTok, it's that our Congress is voting to take away free speech, and that I don't know how we got here. How did we get to ban free speech, or to take over? And I know a lot of this I know the reasons why. I understand the reasoning. Capitalism, white supremacy, all of these things. People are scared. They've been able to the things that are happening right now, even in Palestine, have been happening. This is a 75-year genocide. It hasn't just started October 7th. And people didn't know that. And now, because we have our phones and we're seeing genocide happen daily on our phones, they can't hide it anymore. They can't, obviously, like the pier you mentioned earlier. Well, they did put back the pier. And guess what happened last week when they put the pier back together? You know,
They
they
used it.
infiltrated, they put people into those humanitarian aid trucks, and
Mhm.
that's where they went into Rafah and had a massacre. So they're also talking about international law and breaking international law. You can't do that. You can't
I
disguise
do
yourself as humanitarian aid and then have a massacre.
2 points as well, by the way, with the, the reasoning, I guess, behind the TikTok ban. They've said China. I question it because in Goshen, there's just outside of Big Rapids, there's a company, a Chinese battery plant called Goshen. Um, you had Elisa Slotkin, who's running for the U.S. Senate, who Hillary has openly endorsed and supported. She, along with other politicians, signed non-disclosure agreements and forced that battery plant on that city. People protested and they recalled their city board for all the people that supported it. So we're told China is a fear. We need to be worried about it. But then I bring up that discussion and it's like, oh, it's different, Salim. It's different. And to also focus on the peer stuff that you talked about as well. Yes, they use the peer to bring in IDF troops. 210 Palestinian
And
people were killed.
American troops are in there too. I just want to be very
Yep.
clear. American
Yep.
troops as well.
And they justify it by saying the hostages, right? Which I understand. I support both hostages being released. I'm talking about the Israeli hostages that are being held, along with the 5,000 other hostages that are being held in the West Bank. During that occurrence or massacre that happened, excuse me, with the aid, you had 4 hostages rescued. There were also 3 that were.
270. They've killed 41 of their own hostages so far altogether.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And during that raid, three Israeli hostages were killed,
Yeah.
41 in total.
Yeah.
That's not by the H group, Hamas. That's by IDF forces. And so yeah, I'm not sure what are I've had people that have reached out to me. And I met with people as well that have talked about, I can see how we're pushing this forever war scheme with our
Mhm.
country. People that have said, hey, I used to support the Iraq war that was going on because after 9/11, let's get those people over there.
Right.
And then, like you said with today, it's all documented. We're all seeing it. And I
Mhm.
bring this up with our education stuff as well. Our education's gotten very politicized lately. I mean, you can look at Florida book bans,
I know.
wherever you want to go with it.
Mhm.
I come at it from this perspective. Both my parents, like I said, were refugees. They were both impacted by war. I bring it up with people. We have a big Bosnian community in Grand Rapids. We have a Congolese community in Grand Rapids. I don't feel like we focus on talking about some of these topics. I told you I was reading about Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad. He talks about going down the Congo River. It's his diary of going down the Congo River. And I don't feel like we talk about some of these topics. Instead, we focus on sometimes propaganda type of stuff. I feel like we're not having open discussions, which I always enjoyed about university, family, whatever. We always had open discussions, and my dad, sometimes I thought it was a joke with him, but he would take the counter arguments always because he wanted to challenge it statistically and with another opinion
Mhm.
to see different things. So yeah, that's yeah, I guess to focus on there.
I think we're at time. So I do want to wrap it up. And I do appreciate, the bipartisan approach that you're taking. It sounds like your dad kind of instilled that a little bit in you as well, from what you just said. You do have to meet, and as a social worker, you got to meet people where they're at, right? You can't
100%.
move, sometimes we need radical all the way to the left, we need all the way to the right, so we can somehow try to have conversations. And I think that what has been happening more and more, I am 46 years old and I have watched this happen for a long time now. It's been happening pretty much it was the Tea Party that all of a sudden changed. And I remember reading about that. Oh, it's going to change now. And now I'm
Yep.
like, oh yeah, it has changed. There is a huge divide. It's me or my way, your way or the highway. I want to be very, very, I do not support Trump in any way possible, any shape possible. I am pro humanitarian. I am pro oppressed. I am pro like all of these things, which I do not see that happening from Trump. I don't see that happening from Hillary right now. I don't know much about the Republican, your opponents that you have in the Republican side of things. I will be doing a little bit more research on them as well. But with all that said, I do appreciate that we do when you're in Congress, you have to go to the middle of the aisle. You need to hear what's going on. But are you going to accept any APAC money if you get into
No,
Congress?
no,
Okay.
no.
I just want
Any,
to make sure I've got this on
yeah.
video.
The trap. No, but my stance is the same. I don't want to accept any PAC money even in the future. I met with the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce and they asked me, what's your stance on super PAC money? And I've said, look, I don't want to support that stuff. I wouldn't take any of the money. I'm doing this stuff because, and I think this is an important part for people to understand and to talk about, because I always try to come at things with the different lens, because I understand some people don't care about the humanitarian side of the humanitarian impact of people dying in Palestine. They don't feel that connection. It hurts to hear, but I can't, you got to meet people with where they're at.
Right.
And so I try to bring it up from an economical side sometimes with people where I'm like, hey, we've talked about the housing stuff, but you're not getting as much funding for some social programs because it's going to this country. And I bring up like the super PAC stuff. One thing that they asked me was, how are we supposed to know that you won't accept super PAC money in the future? Like, how are you not going to be bought and paid for in the future? And I go, you can go on my social media page, and I'm not going to say if they had a certain stance or anything, because we did sign NDAs and stuff. But I brought up the Palestine stuff because people that are pro-Israeli or pro-Israel, I think they should be the most confident in me that I won't accept super PAC money, because like I've said, until October 7th, you haven't had a discussion on any of the things that are going on. 97% of the water that's going into Gaza was contaminated. Fishermen were limited to 5 nautical miles offshore for fishing. And I've been talking about this stuff. You can go on my social media and see that I've gone to protests in Chicago. I've spent weekends going to different protests. And that was before it was popular to go to that stuff. So to me, that should show to someone that I don't like his stance. I'm maybe a pro-Israel person, but I at least respect that he's going to go out on a limb and take a stance that is not popular right now, or I don't support. But at least I know he's doing it because he's pointing out the economical impact. He's pointing out, man, Israel is starting to make us distance ourselves from other countries in the world. You're seeing the genocide case being put forth by South Africa. Spain's now backing that. These are European countries that, I mean, they have their own history.
Not looking good right now. We're not looking good.
Yeah, and so I get nervous, especially with like our trade partners as we look towards the future. But yeah, when it comes to PAC money, if I win, awesome. I would be ecstatic to represent this district. And if I get primary replaced in a general election, whatever, in a couple terms, so be it. I am not doing this for money. I want to do it because I want to be the representative of this district. I could make more money going and doing other stuff, and I can do it in a lot less of a stressful time than politics. Because let's be honest, it's a 24/7 job. You're hearing people that you're usually only hearing from people when they hate you and are upset. So it's not fun to do that.
That's
so
true. Yeah. Well, Salim, I really appreciate this and would love to do this again. Are you down to do this again?
Yes, we have a lot more to talk about
We have
with
a ton
healthcare
to
stuff.
talk about. Yeah, yeah. No, this is a great introduction. And again, appreciate your time, your thoughtful answers. And I look forward to, yeah, doing this again with you.
Thank you. Thanks
You're
for interviewing me. If people want to learn more, my website is Vote Salim, vote and then SALIM, M as in Mike.com. You can see on my priorities page, I list all three of my opponents, my Democratic and then the two Republican opponents. So that way people can learn more. I hope that they take that as a reflection of my wanting to be transparent for everyone. Yeah, we'll do more discussions where we can talk about manufacturing, healthcare, legalizing cannabis, all those different topics. They can read more on my website as well. And we'll have some more public meetups coming up here as well in the future. And thank you again so much for interviewing me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Have a
Perfect.
good rest of your day.
Likewise.
Thank you.